If you've decided that 2026 is going to be the year that you get serious about dating and that you get serious about finding your purpose partner, then this is the episode for you. Welcome to Christianish. My name is Keshia. I am a dating coach. I am a hypnotherapist. I help women learn how to break free from their unhealthy relationship patterns and attract healthy, loving, fulfilling relationships. And this is the podcast episode that shouldn't be happening because it is 2026. And I did tease last year that this podcast would be ending and that I'd be starting a new podcast. That is still going to happen, more on the way, but we are pushing back the new podcast. So I will keep talking to you on here for a little while longer. Not too much longer, but yes, for a little bit. But anyways, we are going to talk about the number one reason why up until now you have not been able to find that purpose partner, to find that aligned relationship, settle down, get married, all of that. And the reason for that is because you were hungry. I remember when I was growing up, my mom, my grandma always lecturing me about how you should always eat before you go to the grocery store, right? You never go to the grocery store hungry, because if you go to the grocery store hungry, you are going to end up being attracted to all of the easy access stuff, right? Grocery stores are laid out in a certain way to make it so much more enticing to pick up the junk, the food that you really shouldn't be eating, that isn't the healthiest, and that gives you less bang for your buck. This is why there are candy bars up at the register, right? Because it's easy to grab those and add an extra dollar or two to your balance. And especially if you're hungry, it's quick and easy. You can have the cashier ring that up and eat that right away, right? So it is the same concept in everything else in your life. When you are feeling scarcity, when you are in lack, you end up not making the best choices. And sometimes that's not even a quote unquote bad choice, right? But sometimes it's just the choice that's not most aligned. Like when we talk about careers and jobs, there are people who know that they are meant to be entrepreneurs. You know that you're meant to have your own business. But because you are having some financial struggles right now, you take a job, right? You continue on your career. You put off the business a little bit longer in order to take the money that's in front of you right now. And I'm not saying that this is always a bad thing, right? Because sometimes you're able to have a set plan, you have a strategy, you allow that job to be your first angel investor, and you are able to, maybe you end up putting off the business by 6 months or a year, but you're still doing it. Even the grocery store example, if you had a low blood sugar, for example, then grabbing some sweet drink at the front of the store and drinking that quickly wouldn't be a bad idea, right? You would go ahead and do that until you could actually, think clearly, feel well enough to get real food. But the problem with this is there's a difference between understanding something as a quick solution until you do better than continuously going after the junk, right? If every time you went to the grocery store, you went hungry and always ended up with junk, then that would be a problem. If you allowed yourself to stay in jobs that you hated for 10, 15 years when you knew that you were meant to start a business, that would be terrible. Or even, you're meant to work in a company, have a job, but you allowed yourself to take jobs that aren't aligned instead of really pursuing the dream one, that would be a problem. So it's the same thing in dating. Like, on one hand, especially when I have clients who are really young, you know what I mean, like early 20s and all, I encourage them to date around some. Realize what it is that you like and don't like, find out more about yourself, all of that. But if we are going to get serious about getting married, if we're going to be serious about finding that right partner, then we have to stop dating from a place of hunger. So this is what I mean by dating from a place of hunger, because there are, off the top of my head, because I did not create notes for this episode, but off the top of my head, there are 3 ways I can think of in which, because you are hungry in these areas, you are not allowing yourself to date in a healthy way. One is that you were touch starved. And I think this one is especially difficult to talk about for Christian women, right? Because we are supposed to suppress everything sensual and sexual, or at least that's the way churches can sometimes make that out to be. And this idea of needing to be touched is basic human connection, but a lot of times churches will turn it into something dirty, right? So if you are in a position where you just want so badly to be hugged, to be kissed, all of that, you may find yourself settling in relationships and not having these great dating experiences because you were so starved for that. And also, you might end up taking things further than you wanted to because of the starvation, right? I work with so many women who want to be celibate, want to be abstinent until they're married. And that is a beautiful thing. But then they find themselves in positions where it's been so long since they've had any kind of touch whatsoever, right? That they end up in situations with men where it starts out being one thing and then it just goes further and further. And then they find themselves going back on this commitment that they made to themselves. So if you are starved in a touch way, I would suggest that you start finding ways to remedy that through one, you have loved ones, if you have family, friends, start hugging people, right? get that touch that way. Have a pet, have a dog or a cat that you can cuddle up with. Also get more human touch through massage. This is if 2026 is going to be your year of self-care, then make that self-care ways in which you can also feel someone else's touch through massage, through getting facials, things like that. The other way I can think of that leads to you going into dating starving is you are starving for entertainment. You are bored. There's a reason why that saying idle hands are the devil's work. There's a reason why that saying exists. When we are bored, we just do stupid stuff, right? And part of that can be dating just for the plot. And if that's you, I'm not judging because believe me, I had my years where I dated for the plot. And as someone who, originally went to college for journalism and who is a storyteller at heart and loves hearing a good story, loves having a good story, I have stories for days from that time period of my life, right? I have so many situations that I got myself into that at some point I should share those. Maybe when the new podcast starts, I will be better about sharing my own personal stories. But that being said, is one thing to be that way and to date for the plot. Again, when you're in your teens, when you're in your early 20s. But once you get to a point where you are ready in your life to have something deeper, to truly make a commitment to, for most of the women that I work with, that commitment looks like marriage. Once you get to that place, yeah, you have to start dating with discernment and with intention. And part of that is not being bored. It is in having a life that is interesting and fulfilling. Because when you have that, then you are more discerning about your time and you're not going to want to spend time with people who bore you to death. So this means that you need to get hobbies. You need to commit to learning new things, right? Take up another job, take up a part-time job. If one of your resolutions this year is paying off debt or building up your savings, then kill two birds with one stone. Find a part-time job or a side hustle in something that you are interested in and you want to learn more about, and as you're learning you can make money doing it, and you can also kill more time and not be bored, not spend your days doom scrolling. And the funny thing about this is that as you do that, you will get out there, you will meet more people, and you will increase your chances of meeting a high quality man. So then the third thing kind of goes with this, and that is not only are you bored, but maybe you are lonely. And it kind of goes with that first point too about being touch starved. If you are starving out of loneliness and just wanting companionship, I think it is really important for you to realize that one, companionship isn't always romantic. And I think a lot of women do themselves a disservice when they don't realize how valuable their female friendships are and that they aren't spending time cultivating those relationships. You're spending so much time trying to put yourself out here dating, which again, I think is a beautiful thing. I am a married woman. I adore my husband and I'm a dating coach, right? If I didn't think that dating and romantic relationships weren't beautiful and important, then I wouldn't be coaching women on them. But those are romantic relationships, that is, are one set of relationships in a whole constellation of relationships that are important. You know, your professional relationships are important as well, whether you're talking about coworkers and bosses, or you own a business and you're talking about clients and customers. Your familiar relationships are important, whether that is you are close with your family and you spend a lot of time with them, or you're not close with your family, but you are able to learn some life lessons from those interactions, right? And your friendships are important as well. So if loneliness is the issue, then you really need to lean into cultivating your other relationships. While you're out here dating in 2026, you also need to be following up with your friends, making dates with them, and actually following through on those. Like going out, saying not just, hey, we should get together sometime, but actually pulling out calendars and being like, hey, when are you free? You need to be making this the year that you better yourself professionally. You need to find mentors, become a mentor to someone else, start networking, all of that. Because again, once you do this, you are also, if your goal is to find the right man, well, you're also going to be putting yourself out there more and building relationships. So the right partner for you might be someone that a friend of yours knows, right? And they can introduce you. But again, you're also going to be more discerning, you're going to be more intentional, and you're going to have higher standards. Because this is one of the things that I noticed when I was in my single season, is that when I got more intentional about my other relationships, including also my relationship with myself, I became more attractive to men because they saw this woman who was out there with a busy, fulfilled, fun life, and they wanted to be a part of that. But I also became pickier because men would ask me out on dates and I'd say, well, what were you thinking? What was it that you wanted to do? And they'd give me plans. And if it wasn't more exciting than the time I'd set aside that week to spend by myself, or the time I had set aside to spend with my friends, then I'd always just be like, thanks, but no thanks, right? So that meant that anyone I dated had to put in a little bit more work in order to actually get that date with me. So, and I'm not saying this to like brag on myself or make myself to make myself seem like the best person ever, right? Like, I do think I am like a perfect fit for the people who are aligned in my life, right? But it's more that anyone can do this. That when you are intentional about building your ideal life, you're only going to want people in your life who fit into that. And when you don't have a life at all, because you don't have relationships that you've cultivated, you don't make plans, you don't go out, you don't leave your house, then inherently the bar becomes lower, right? Because anyone can come into your life and fit into what you have going on because you don't have that much going on. Like, I know that sounds harsh, but it's true. So when you really build up a beautiful life for yourself, then it's going to take a special kind of man to come in and be able to fit in with that and fit that standard. So it's honestly back to the very beginning when I was talking about grocery stores, right? It's the same thing. If you decide to be at home and cook yourself a nice meal, something that's healthy and nutritious, and you eat and you're full, or you went out for lunch at a good restaurant before you went to the grocery store, then when you get to the grocery store, you're not that inclined to really reach for those candy bars at the cash register, right? Because you're already full. So you're not just gonna grab like whatever junk and eat that while you're standing in the checkout line, or while you're in the car on the way home because you're full. So same with your dating. When you have filled your life with positive experiences and great hobbies and fun events and interesting travels and all of that, then in order for a man to fit into that, he has to be just as amazing as all these other opportunities that you've created for yourself. So let me know, either if you're on YouTube listening to this, or if I think Apple Music now, if you're listening to the podcast on Apple, lets you make comments on the episodes. So let me know there, or also on social media. I'm on Instagram and TikTok and Blue Sky, all of those at Keshia Rice. So you can DM me as well. But let me know what you're doing to make sure that you are full this year so that as you pursue dating, you are pursuing it from a place of confidence, from a place of loving yourself and only wanting to give yourself the best. So I will talk to you soon. I love you so much. And again, stay tuned for exciting things to happen later on this year.
This podcast is brought to you by Contessa Digital.